Every empire that centralized its money completely collapsed. And right now, we're racing toward the same mistake they made, except this time, it's irreversible. I'm going to show you something that made me lose sleep for 3 nights straight. Here's what nobody's talking about. This isn't the first time humanity has tried to go cashless. It's happened before, multiple times, and every single time it ended in disaster. But before we get there, let me tell you why these matters to me personally. I have 2 kids, 7 and 9 years old, and I'm genuinely terrified about the world they're inheriting, because if we get this wrong, they won't have the financial freedom I grew up with. They won't be able to buy a used bike with cash from a neighbor. They won't be able to save money under their mattress when they don't trust the system. Every transaction they make will be watched, recorded, and potentially controlled by someone else. That's not the future I want for them, and I'm betting it's not the future you want either. Now when most people hear cashless society, they think convenient, modern, safe, no more fumbling for change, no more getting robbed, just tap your phone and go. And look, I get it. I use my card for almost everything too. But here's what history teaches us, and it's a lesson we keep forgetting. Convenience and control are 2 sides of the same coin, and once you give up one, you can't get the other back. Let me walk you through 4 moments in history where societies tried to centralize all money and power in one place. 4 times when governments said, "Trust us with everything," and 4 times when ordinary people paid the price. Let's start in China, the year 1024, the Song Dynasty. The Song Dynasty was, by all accounts, incredible. They had more advanced technology than Europe wouldn't see for another 400 years. They had gunpowder, compasses, movable type printing. They were rich, powerful, and innovative. And they created the world's first paper money. Now this wasn't just any paper money. At first, it was brilliant. Merchants could trade these notes instead of carrying heavy copper coins across dangerous roads. The notes were backed by actual metal reserves. You could walk into a government office and exchange your paper for real coins anytime you wanted. People loved it, trade exploded, the economy boomed. But then something happened that always happens when governments control money completely. They got greedy. By 1120, less than 100 years later, the government was printing money with nothing backing it. No copper, no silver, no gold, just paper and promises. They needed money for wars, they needed money for palaces, they needed money to pay off officials, so they just printed it. And here's the key part. Because all money was now centralized through the government system, regular people had no escape route. You couldn't opt out. You couldn't say, "I don't trust these paper notes anymore, I'll use something else." There was nothing else. The government had made alternatives illegal. Inflation went insane. A bag of rice that cost 1 note suddenly cost 10 notes, then 100, then 1,000. By 1272, the Song Dynasty collapsed. Historians will tell you it was the Mongol invasion. And sure, that was the final blow. But the empire was already dying from within because they had destroyed their own money and their people's trust. The people who suffered most, not the emperors, not the generals, the farmers, the merchants, the everyday families who watched their life savings become worthless paper overnight. Here's what keeps me up at night. They couldn't see it coming. Right up until the collapse, government officials were saying everything was fine. Trust the system, they said. This is progress, they said. Sound familiar? Fast forward a few centuries. Rome, 301 AD. By this point, Rome had been the dominant superpower for hundreds of years. They had roads connecting 3 continents. They had aqueducts, bathhouses, the Colosseum. They were the definition of civilization. But they had a problem. The empire was too expensive to maintain. Sound familiar? They had troops stationed everywhere from Britain to Mesopotamia. All those soldiers needed to be paid. All those roads needed maintenance. All those government officials needed salaries. So Emperor Diocletian did something clever, or so he thought. He didn't just print more money like the Song Dynasty would later do. Instead, he created a system of price controls. He literally made a list of the maximum price for everything in the empire: bread, wine, clothing, labor, everything. If you charged more than the government-mandated price, you could be executed. Now Diocletian also did something else. He centralized the money supply completely. All official transactions had to go through government-approved channels. He created government warehouses where goods were stored and distributed. He tracked who bought what, when, where. He essentially created the Roman version of a cashless, government-controlled economy. Here's what happened. The official economy died almost immediately. Farmers stopped bringing food to cities because they'd lose money at government prices. Craftsmen stopped making goods. Merchants stopped trading. Instead, a black market exploded. People started bartering directly, trading goods for goods in secret, because the official money system was worthless. The government response: make underground trading illegal, send soldiers to hunt down black market traders. But you can't stop human beings from trading. It's literally in our DNA. We've been trading since we lived in caves. The government tried to force people to stay in their father's professions. If your dad was a baker, you had to be a baker, by law, because otherwise, essential services would collapse. Think about that. They had to pass laws forcing people to work certain jobs because the economic system was so broken that nobody would voluntarily participate in it anymore. Within decades, the Western Roman Empire was fragmenting. By 476 AD, it was gone. Now historians will tell you Rome fell because of barbarian invasions, political corruption, military problems, and all that's true. But here's what they often skip. The economic system had already collapsed from within. The barbarians just knocked over a structure that was already hollow. The Roman people had lost faith in their money and their government's ability to manage it. And once you lose that faith, the empire is already over. It just doesn't know it yet. Let's jump ahead to 1789, France, the Revolution. The French people had just overthrown their king. They were building a new society based on liberty, equality, brotherhood. They were going to get it right this time. No more tyrants, no more oppression. They had one massive problem. They were completely broke. Years of war and royal excess had drained the treasury. So, the revolutionary government came up with a solution. They seized all the land owned by the Catholic Church, about 10% of all land in France. Then they issued paper currency called assignats, backed by this land. Brilliant, right? Real estate backing real money. What could go wrong? At first, nothing. It worked beautifully. The assignats held their value. People used them. The economy recovered. But then the same story repeated. The government needed more money. They were fighting wars against other European monarchies. They were building a new government structure. They were paying supporters and silencing enemies. So they printed more assignats, then more, then more. By 1796, just 7 years later, the assignats were worthless. A loaf of bread cost wheelbarrows full of paper money. People were literally using assignats to wallpaper their houses because it was cheaper than buying actual wallpaper. But here's the part that matters for our story. Throughout this collapse, the French government kept trying to force people to use the assignats. They passed laws making it illegal to refuse them as payment. They arrested merchants who wouldn't accept them. They executed people for using gold and silver instead. They tried to make opting out illegal. And this is the pattern we keep seeing. When a government controls all the money and that money starts failing, they don't admit the mistake. They double down. They criminalize alternatives. They trap people inside a burning building and lock the exits. The French economy didn't recover until they abandoned the assignats completely and went back to gold and silver. Back to money that the government couldn't just print whenever they wanted more. Now you might be thinking, okay, but those are old examples. Ancient history, medieval times. Surely we're smarter now. We have computers, we have safeguards, we have democracy. Do we? Let me show you something more recent. Zimbabwe 2008. The government printed so much money that inflation hit 89.7 sextillion%. That's not a typo. Sextillion, the word I never thought I'd use in a sentence. They issued a $100 trillion bill that couldn't buy a loaf of bread. Venezuela, 2016 to now. A country sitting on more oil reserves than Saudi Arabia, where people are now starving because the government destroyed the currency. The average person lost 24 pounds in 2017, not from dieting, from hunger. Lebanon, 2019 to now. Banks froze people's accounts. Life savings disappeared overnight. People who thought their money was safe discovered they couldn't access their own funds. Greece, 2015. Banks closed. ATMs ran out of cash. The government limited withdrawals to €60 per day. Your money was there in theory, but you couldn't touch it. Canada, 2022. During the trucker protests, the government froze the bank accounts of protesters and even people who donated to them. No trial, no court order initially, just frozen, your money locked away because the government disagreed with your politics. Think about that. In a modern Western democracy, the government cut people off from their own money as a political weapon. And this is what a cashless society enables. When all your money exists as numbers in a database controlled by someone else, you don't own it. You have permission to use it, and that permission can be revoked. See, physical cash has one incredible property: it's bearer-owned. Whoever holds it owns it. It doesn't require anyone's permission to use. It doesn't require electricity, internet, or a bank being open. It exists independent of any system. But digital money requires infrastructure, institutions, and most importantly, permission. Here's where we are right now, in 2025. Cash is disappearing faster than ever before. In Sweden, only 9% of transactions use physical cash. In China, mobile payments are so dominant that beggars have QR codes. In India, the government literally banned certain bills overnight in 2016, forcing hundreds of millions into digital systems. During the pandemic, businesses stopped accepting cash for health reasons. Many never started again. Some countries are talking about phasing out physical currency entirely within the next decade. And the marketing for this is brilliant. It's all about convenience, security, tracking your spending, getting rewards points. They make it sound like physical cash is the problem, like it's dirty, outdated, dangerous. But they never talk about control. Right now, central banks around the world are developing what they call CBDCs, Central Bank Digital Currencies. This isn't Bitcoin. This isn't independent crypto. This is government-issued, government-controlled digital money. The Bank of England is testing it. The European Central Bank is testing it. China has already launched the digital yuan. The Federal Reserve is exploring it. And here's what makes CBDCs different from the cash in your wallet. They can be programmed. Think about that word, programmed. The government could program your money to expire if you don't spend it fast enough. They could program it to not work for certain products they don't want you to buy. They could program it to track every transaction you make, where you spend it, what you buy, who you give it to. They could program it to turn off. Imagine waking up tomorrow and your money just doesn't work. Not because you're a criminal, not because you did anything wrong, because you said something on social media the government didn't like, because you donated to a political cause they opposed, because you protested a policy, because your social credit score dropped. You think that's science fiction? It's already happening in China with the social credit system. Do something the government doesn't approve of, and suddenly you can't buy plane tickets. You can't get loans. Your kids can't get into good schools. And they can do this because the money is digital, centralized, and controlled. Now the defenders of a cashless society will say I'm being paranoid. They'll say these systems have checks and balances. They'll say we have laws protecting us. They'll say democratic governments would never abuse this power. And to that, I ask, has history shown government to be trustworthy with absolute power over money? The Song Dynasty had laws. Rome had laws. France had revolutionary ideals of liberty. They'll say it's about stopping crime. Cash is used by drug dealers, tax evaders, terrorists, and that's true. Cash is used by criminals. But you know what? Criminals also use cars, phones, and the internet. We don't ban those things for everyone else. The real question is, should everyone lose their financial privacy and freedom because a minority misuses it? They'll say, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. That argument has been used to justify every surveillance state in history, and it misses the point entirely. Privacy isn't about hiding bad things. Privacy is about freedom. It's about dignity. It's about not having to justify every decision you make to someone watching. Let me ask you this. Do you close the bathroom door even though you're not doing anything illegal in there? Of course you do, because privacy is a human need, not a privilege for criminals. Every major social change in history started with people doing things the government of the time considered wrong. The American Revolution was illegal. The Civil Rights Movement broke laws. Women voting was illegal. Being gay was illegal. Progress often requires the ability to act outside the system's control, and a fully cashless, fully monitored financial system removes that ability forever. Here's why what's happening now is more dangerous than anything in history. When Rome's money system collapsed, people went back to bartering, to gold, to local systems. When the Song Dynasty fell, people returned to metal coins. When the French assignats failed, they went back to precious metals. There was always a backup, always an alternative, always an escape route. But if we create a fully digital, fully centralized money system and it fails, there is no going back. You can't barter with numbers in a database. You can't trade digital currency if the power grid fails. You can't hide digital money under your mattress during a crisis. The entire system depends on electricity, internet, banks, servers, and governments all working properly all the time. And history tells us that's a guarantee we can't count on. Every system fails eventually. The question isn't if, it's when. And when a digital-only system fails, it fails completely and instantly for everyone at once. In 2017, British Airways had a computer system failure. Thousands of flights cancelled, people stranded worldwide. It lasted days. In 2021, Facebook went down for 6 hours and took Instagram and WhatsApp with it. Billions of people lost access to communication. In 2024, a single software update from CrowdStrike crashed 8.5 million computers worldwide, disrupting airlines, hospitals, banks, and governments. These were accidents. These were technical glitches. Now imagine if it wasn't an accident. Imagine if it was a cyber attack. Imagine if it was a government deliberately shutting things down. Or imagine if it was nothing dramatic at all. Just a slow collapse like we've seen before, where the money gradually becomes worthless, but you can't escape because there's no alternative. Here's what really scares me. It's not the dramatic collapse. It's not some dystopian future where we're all living in a surveillance state. It's the gradual loss of freedom that we don't even notice until it's gone. It's the fact that my kids might grow up thinking it's completely normal for every purchase they make to be tracked and recorded. It's the fact that they might never know what it feels like to have money that's truly theirs, that exists in their pocket, that can't be frozen or monitored or controlled by anyone else. Physical cash has problems. It can be stolen, it can be lost, it can be counterfeited, all true. But it has one property that digital money can never have. It's free. Not free as in costless, free as in freedom. When you hand someone cash, that transaction is between you and them, period. No bank needs to approve it. No government needs to know about it. No corporation gets to collect data on it. No algorithm decides if it's allowed. It's yours, truly, completely yours. And we're about to give that up voluntarily because tapping a phone is easier than counting change. Every person in the Song Dynasty who watched their paper money become worthless thought it wouldn't happen to them. Every Roman who got paid in debased coins thought the empire would last forever. Every French revolutionary who used assignats thought this time would be different. They were all wrong. And we're making the same bet they made, that our government is different, our technology is better, our systems are stronger. But we're not different, we are human. And humans in power always, eventually, abuse that power. It's not a question of if, it's when. So here's where we are. We're standing at a moment in history where we have to make a choice. And most people don't even realize we're making it because it's happening so gradually, so conveniently, so quietly. The choice is this. Do we want to live in a world where financial transactions can exist outside of institutional control? Or do we want every exchange of value to require permission from a central authority? Do we want to preserve the ability to say no to the system? Or do we want to hard code our dependence into the infrastructure of society? I'm not saying we should go back to a gold standard. I'm not saying we should ban credit cards or outlaw digital payments. I use them, you use them, they're useful tools. But tools and prisons look the same until you try to leave. What I'm saying is this: we need to preserve the option to opt out. We need to maintain physical cash as a backup, as a check on power, as an escape route. Because history shows us, over and over again, that centralized control of money leads to abuse. Every single time. The Song Dynasty, Rome, France, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Lebanon, Greece, Canada. The pattern is crystal clear. When governments control all the money, they eventually use that control to serve themselves, not the people. And the scary part, most of those governments didn't start out evil. They started out trying to help. They started out with good intentions. They started out saying, "Trust us, this is for your own good." But good intentions plus absolute power equals disaster. That's the lesson of history. So what do we do about this? First, understand that every time you choose digital over cash, you're voting. You're voting for the kind of system you want to live in. And that's fine if it's a conscious choice. But most people aren't choosing. They're just following the path of least resistance. Second, use cash sometimes, even if it's less convenient. Support businesses that accept it. Push back when stores try to go cashless only, not because cash is perfect, but because options are essential. Third, talk about this. Most people have never thought about what a cashless society actually means. They think it's just about technology and convenience. They don't realize it's about power and control. Fourth, push your representatives to protect the right to use cash. Several countries are already passing laws that ban businesses from refusing cash. That's a good start. And fifth, teach your kids about this. Because they're growing up in a world where they might never hold physical money, they need to understand what's being lost and why it matters. My 7- and 9-year-old don't fully get this yet, but I'm teaching them. I'm showing them how to handle cash. I'm explaining why their grandparents don't trust putting everything in banks. I'm making sure they understand that money used to mean something you could hold, not just numbers on a screen. Because if their generation doesn't understand what freedom looks like, they won't fight for it when it's gone. Look, I don't know the future. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this time really is different. Maybe our governments and institutions are trustworthy enough to give absolute control over our money. But history tells me that's a bad bet. Every empire that centralized money completely ended in collapse. Every government that controlled all transactions eventually abused that power. Every system that removed people's ability to opt out eventually turned against them. The Song Dynasty, Rome, revolutionary France, and a dozen modern examples all followed the same path. And we're walking down that path right now, convinced that somehow, magically, we'll get a different result. Einstein supposedly said that insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Well, here we are, about to eliminate cash and centralize all money digitally, and we're expecting it to work out fine. That's insane. The difference between a tool and a trap is whether you can choose not to use it. And we're building a financial system with no exit door. I don't want that future for my kids. I don't want them to grow up in a world where every transaction is monitored, every purchase requires permission, and financial freedom is just a story I tell them about the old days. So I'm using cash when I can. I'm supporting businesses that accept it. I'm voting for representatives who protect it. And I'm making noise about this while there's still time to change course. Because once it's gone forever. And that's the thing about history. We keep thinking we're different from the people who came before us. We keep thinking we're smarter, more advanced, more enlightened. But we're not. We're just people, and people repeat the same mistakes unless they learn from history. So the question is, are we going to learn this time? Here's what I want to know from you, and I genuinely want to hear your answer in the comments. When was the last time you used physical cash for something, and do you think it matters if it disappears completely? Not a complicated question, not a debate, just your experience and your gut feeling. Because this conversation matters, your kids are watching what we do, history is watching what we choose. And right now, we're choosing convenience over freedom without even realizing it. Let me know in the comments, and if this made you think twice about what we're walking into, share it with someone who needs to hear it. See you in the next one.